Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Oorlund Park. And, well, last episode we built an impressive monorail station. This episode we're going to be building a slightly less impressive box office and security gate combo. With the holidays I wasn't really able to do too much with this build, but I'm pretty happy with what I have, and I also hope that you guys had a happy holidays as well. Mine was pretty good. It was quiet. And I'd rather have quiet than eventful and full of travel. It's just nice to kind of stay home. So, this building. It was a bit of a pain trying to figure out where I wanted to go with this. There's different varieties of box offices for all of these theme parks out there. Some of them have little booths, some of them are circular, some of them are incorporated into the main gate, such as the one I'm doing right now. And that was the one that's the kind of style I really wanted to stick with. The actual details though, well, these buildings tend to be incredibly plain and uninteresting because you frankly should not get the money put into the scenery work until you're actually into the park. Even though it's important to make that first impression because these guys are going to be the first people who get your money, given the fact that they sell theme park tickets here. Granted, I think in this day and age you buy them online and then you just print them out. Well, actually, I guess you have to go to these offices anyways to hand in the coupon code to get your actual tickets printed. Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent. I am working on the roof here. I tried to use some of the haunted house pieces, but it just wasn't working out. They were just too big or not really conforming the right way, clipping a little too weirdly, so decided to scrap it and try to make my own shape here. And you'll see a lot of my my design or detailing tends to be, again, covering things up like discussed in the last episode, where I'm not really trying to, put a detail there because I feel like it really deserves to be there, but usually to cover some aspect of the shape of a building that I didn't really like. And yeah, this is a bit of an extension of that, just putting some art shapes there and then outlining them with some wood so that way they look a little bit more like they're part of the structure instead of just sticking out and having the shape be even weirder and not make much more sense than it would without those details. And I am bringing in a little bit of that neon detail or detailing over to this building as well. The style is supposed to be fairly similar, using similar building materials as the monorail station, but we're going to kind of take it down a notch in terms of both detailing and in terms of scale, of course. Speaking of which, I did increase the size of the monorail station, as I think I touched on last episode. It was just a little too small, only because the monorail track was just too low to the ground for it to be reasonable to expect any guest or staff member to pass underneath it. And I wanted to use those side areas as a backdoor entrance into the park, or a way for maintenance or deliveries to get into the park without going through the main gates and causing a terrible time for traffic. Really, the idea of theme parks to me is very similar to that of City Skylines or city management games where, yeah, traffic is a huge thing that you're going to have to manage. If you can direct the flow of your guests really well, you'll make money a lot faster since, guests aren't going to be staying in one spot and basically being worthless. The, the idea is that if your guests are stuck in a crowd or stuck in line, they're not out, buying food or buying gifts for their, obnoxious family members or friends who weren't able to come to the park and demand a souvenir. Or you might just be one of those people who buy souvenirs for your friends and it's like, oh great, you gave me a $4 thing I could get at Walmart for about $2 or something like that. I'm used to the Disney theme park tat, which is just, especially if you go for the Star Wars stuff, it is just overpriced. It is the exact same stuff you'd find at a Target or a Walmart, but usually like 4 times the price. But that's just a bit of a tangent there. I am working on the queue area for the box office here, adding some cattle pins so then, keep the guests from collecting like a mob and having some form of order before you enter the park. There's a couple details like within the pillars, those baubles that I try to use to add a little bit more shape. I decided to abandon later on. Just wasn't really feeling it, wasn't really able to recolor them in any reasonable way that fits. They just kind of stuck out too much, and that's the kind of detail you don't want sticking out too much. And yeah, just trying to add the wall, removing the gray boxing here. It's starting to really look like a McDonald's, to be honest. It does change in a bit of time here, especially with the color changes. I'm trying to lower the roof at the moment because it was just way too large. I think we're getting close to about 5-meter structure, which is about, well, we're getting close to about 2 stories, which is pretty massive for a box office, so shrunk that down a little bit. I sadly don't really follow the advice that I kind of gave last episode, where I said to work in layers. Do a lot of your work separately from your main build, that way you can easily add it on, and if you need to make changes, you can easily do that away from the other build, and saves a lot of time, saves a lot of work. I didn't really follow that for this build because I was just too busy trying to nail down the concept of the shape and the detailing and how I wanted this to look, that I wasn't really thinking about, oh yeah, I probably should have made the roof separately from all of this. I probably should have had a collection of parts to make my life a lot easier, but yeah, you know, what did I really lose except for some time, right? Now in this case, I'm actually adding the box office windows, and it's really nothing except for a couple windows, adding the half circle arch shape down below to act as a tray, and a combination of a small firework and the TV stand to make the microphone and speaker that you would be communicating with or through to the cashier. And yeah, just adding details to make these walls look a little less flat. I think I fell into a trap earlier on where it was starting to look a little too detailed, a little too busy, definitely contrasting a lot more with the monorail station. And I remember back when I made the monorail station, also going a little too overboard with the detail and reined it back in. It's very, very easy to add too much, and sometimes less is more, so just remember that when you're working on something ornate, or just trying to make something shine a little bit more. Sometimes it's not adding a bunch of extra frills, it's usually removing them that makes it look a lot better. But speaking of extra frills, also wanting to add these really nice fence pieces, which really make a great trim for the roof. The ones on the bottom of the roof are going to be upright, the ones on the top are going to be upside down. These will eventually be gold. The color scheme of this building is going to be very, very similar to that of the monorail station, just because why not? It's part of the same area of the park. They are also the park colors, so it really does make sense to do it that way. Because there really aren't any pieces that would fit in this area, though, I had to use art shapes just to close these gaps. Everything else would have added too much texture to it, and again, that's another tool that you'll have at your disposal, is texture. Sometimes you want less, sometimes you want more, and there are plenty of pieces out there to satisfy. The reason why I use these wooden beams for the roofs, both for the box office here and for the monorail, is because they have a bit of a metallic feel to them, or look to them rather. They look very shiny, they are painted to be very glossy. And here we have a small cinematic, just because we want to break up one of the transitions. As I didn't really film it, I was recoloring everything, so here's how the ticket box offices look at the end. And we're going to be diving right back into making more. This time we're going to be making smaller ones. Instead of being 12 meters wide, these ones are going to be 8 meters wide and have 4 windows instead of 6. Now, it's a pretty easy job. Just delete the midsection, make sure things transfer over cleanly, and copy and paste. As always, you'll find that Planet Coaster usually involves a lot of copy and pasting. When you want to make sure that details are consistently spread across all the walls, you would be selecting a wall piece, selecting all the details, transferring it on the grid. Usually makes it very uniform. But it also means that you could probably just make one wall piece at a time, one roof piece at a time, instead of having to make the entire thing all at once. And it does make the time go by a lot faster. Now, this is actually the security gate, which again uses the box office as the base, but it is a little different, hollowed out, no real structure inside, just a roof pretty much, or a canopy. Adding the cattle pens here just to make sure that the guests aren't just mobbing around the gate and causing not only congestion but chaos and pandemonium. Usually you would want a single file line. I'm actually thinking about adding turnstiles to these things, but I have not yet decided on how I want to do that, or if I just want to take something from the workshop. Fog has made some excellent turnstiles, and it would just be a shame to make something that doesn't look as good. So I might add his, but it would be a little bit of a chore to add them to the building. But, something I can probably do in time. Now, just to add a little bit more variation to these buildings, I decided to make this roof shorter than the one for the box office, because, it can stand to be shorter. It is basically just an overhang, a canopy, a cover just for the walkway. It's not really housing anything. And, for the most part, it wasn't that painful, though it was a little annoying. And yeah, just, because of that, it's going to have a different shape. Which again is fine, because it's not really, repeating itself too much, and it's, more variance, but still using the same style, the same details, more or less, so it's not too distracting. It's not like, oh, it's a nice blue building, and all of a sudden there's a hot pink building right next to it, and making this very distracting pattern. No, this is something pretty straightforward. And right now I'm just trying to copy the other side, or copy this to the other side, rather. And not really much happens here, so I kind of want to talk about a few content plans with you guys. The idea is that once a week we'll finish a building or a few buildings or a section of the park. But I think for the smaller details like lighting, path details, those little things. Oh god, my voice cracked there. But those little tiny details, I'd probably do it on the stream, maybe once a week. Just kind of go through, add backstage, all that stuff. Honestly, I think that would be a good use of our time here, and also get you guys into the live stream if you guys haven't checked me out on Twitch. I know I haven't really been streaming too much because of the holidays, but we'll get there sometime soon. Now here I'm adding the buildings here just to make sure they all line up. I have them going in an arch here, but I wasn't really happy with the size of them. It's because they're just too wide, so we made them a lot more narrow, and they look fantastic, as you can see from this beautiful cinematic shot as the shadows go past it. I think this looks so much better. Just beautiful work, as I'm patting myself on the back, as you do. So, here comes the fun stuff, the path work. It is... Okay, so you should know that I do add a little bit of trial and error to my videos, but I do not show you the extent of trial and error that I have to endure, because you guys would be sitting here for probably about an extra 10 minutes or so watching nothing happen. Especially with this path. Some of this, actually probably even more, some of the stuff I didn't even bother recording, so you probably would be sitting here for a full hour. Yeah, don't make this look like... Don't get the opinion that this is extremely quick for me. It is not. There's a lot of methodical planning and trial and error that goes into this. So, bear that in mind. Pathing especially. I have this problem where my paths end up looking too much like faces and not like actual plazas or functioning path. So in this case, I'm trying to remedy that. Kind of goes back to my City Skylines days where I used to basically make crop circles for neighborhoods, and that was pretty fun, but doesn't quite work with a theme park. Guess really like a direct point of access, instead of going all the way around a crop circle. Also, the spacing between the booths and the station was a pretty important consideration, as I wanted to make sure that there was enough room for, say, a guest or a few guests to just park themselves right in front of the monorail sign to take a good photo of the sign, instead of having to be super crammed with other people or really blocking the way of the gates or of the monorail hallways. So I found a point and just kind of marked that center, and that was more or less the center of this plaza. Now I'm trying to add the mulch here for the planters that are going to be in this plaza. Now, some of the gaps in the path are just covered with a arch piece that is just colored the same color as the path, just to make this look a little bit more open and honestly realistic and well planned. But for these planters, I wanted to add some mulch, which is a combination of the alpine dead grass, pine needles, the deciduous leaves, the deciduous dirt, and the Arctic mud. And just trying to layer these textures in a way that makes sense. Funny enough, you probably won't be seeing this that much because it's going to be covered by trees, covered by bushes, and covered by a few planter fences. And yeah, it's just, you can see it as a waste of time, but I think it's important to, well, I guess it's not really important. It's just a nice detail, that just layering those terrain textures. This is a custom biome. I got it from Wings and Strings, who made a Sierra Nevada-esque biome, but I made a few modifications because I'm not using snow. And this is going to be more... this is a US park, which is what I'm trying to decide on which ties into the foliage choices I'm using here. I want to make sure that these are temperate trees, pretty much. More or less what you would probably find in like the Sacramento Valley in California. You would get a little bit of the browner, yellower grass. You would get some very basic tree choices, some ashes, some birches. But if we wanted to expand later on into a different type of tree type, or foliage choice category, whatever you want to call it, it would still make sense. Like, I could have palm trees and not have it stick out too much. But now I'm adding the planter boxes here, and they're not really boxes so much as they're just completely gated off with these the combination of basically of beams and fences and the coaster station wall pieces. They are 2 meters wide. They are short, great for making very small shapes out of. It can be a little bit of a pain to bridge all the gaps here, which is why I did not leave that footage in, because that would have just been murder to watch. And instead we're going to move on to the last part of this time lapse and see what I did for the I guess they're flagpoles, but they're kind of multi-purpose. They host they house speakers, they house lights for the path. They kind of do it all. I saw these at Disney when looking at their giant plaza between Disneyland Park and California Adventure. They have a few of these set up. We don't use nearly as many, and these are pretty simple structures. What I end up doing for a bit of the speaker illusion here is that I use the effects racks for snow, which have a grill type pattern on them, which makes it look like a long speaker, and the speakers are just underground. They just play like the the Beautiful World of Planet Coaster or something like that, one of those songs. A very generic but whimsical song to greet you as you enter the park. And just adding some trim, using these icing pieces to look like metal, and making the poles longer, using the archer for scale, making sure that it's really high up so that no one can really screw around with it, and adding a couple little details, and I end up spreading these around everywhere in this plaza. And honestly, I'm very happy with the result. Here's a little bit of a glimpse of that. I just kind of play around with it a little bit. It was, the spacing is a little bit tricky sometimes, because you want to make sure you spread the light out, but you don't want to make it to where it's too saturated with light in one area. You want to make sure that you're not obscuring any views. In this case, I was obscuring views of the sign, so you wouldn't be able to take a good photo, but that's been fixed up. But we have come to the end of our time-lapse footage. Here's some B-roll for you guys to enjoy of, frankly, not much really going on here. You know, sadly, I don't really have much to show in this park because it is only a entrance plaza. But hopefully in time these segments will be something to look forward to when we add more and more to this park. But that is another episode under wraps. Thank you guys so much for watching yet another episode of Oorlund Park. If you like what you see, hit that subscribe button to be notified when another one comes your way. Should be another one out next week. What are we going to be working on next time? Hopefully something within the park proper.